You're listening to the Deerfield Public Library Podcast for December 2025. Welcome to the Deerfield Public Library Podcast, where we host conversations with authors and artists from Chicagoland and around the world. And today, I'm so happy to share a conversation I had with Annah Feinberg. She's both an author and an artist, and she grew up here in our Chicago suburb, Deerfield, Illinois. The occasion of our conversation is the publication of Annah's first full-length graphic novel titled Goodbye, Dolly. It's an astonishing, hilarious, and even moving story that imagines the afterlife of Dolly the sheep. We'll explore its creation and its surprising themes. Annah Feinberg is also known for her comics and humor writing, which have been featured in such prestigious publications as The New Yorker, McSweeney's Bon Appétit, and more. Annah has developed adult animation shows for Showtime and AMC, wrote and produced short films Fetus Monster and The Workplace, and is currently developing another adult animated show, writing 2 live-action features, and working on another graphic novel. Formerly a playwright, dramaturg, and a Hollywood assistant, Annah has an MFA in dramaturgy from Columbia University and was a founding member of theater activist group The Kilroys. And she ends her bio by saying, before that, she was a child who wrote and drew, often at the very same time. This was such a fun conversation about millennial culture, existential dread, parenthood, and finding an artistic form. And, of course, the legacy of Dolly the sheep. Annah just makes me laugh and think and cry, and we're delighted to have her on our show and celebrate her at her hometown library. Here's my conversation with Annah Feinberg. Okay, Annah, welcome. I have to start by asking you, you've told me several times now that the Deerfield Public Library raised you, was a huge part of your childhood. Your bio, you mention that you write and draw often at the same time, but also that as a child, you wrote and drew often at the same time. So
and often at the Deerfield Public Library.
Yes, I have this vision of you somewhere in the stacks doodling on our books or something.
I'm
so
sure
tell
I did.
us, yeah.
I have no specific memory of that, but that sounds like something I would have done. So I apologize for my former self. But yeah, we were just a huge library family, and I grew up in Deerfield, and all our books were I just think it sort of fostered my entire love of reading from the very beginning of my life. That I don't remember a time before the Deerfield Public Library. I know there was a huge renovation to it years ago, but my memory of it is like the OG building, which is like still a really special kind of location in my memory. And I crucially used to burn so many CDs that I checked up at the library when I was in high school. So I, again, apologize for that. Like every single musical cast album, I think I burned from checking it out from the library. And then I had like this book of burned CDs, specifically of musicals that were all completely pirated. I hope I'm allowed to say that without basic legal action.
Open access, yeah.
So that certainly dates the era.
Yeah, well,
I don't think people are burning CDs anymore.
That's sort of where I wanted to start, is a kind of weird place, maybe, but maybe not, is when I was thinking about your just incredible graphic novel, Goodbye, Dolly, which we're here to talk about. I kept thinking about this as a text of our generation. I think we were just a couple years apart in Deerfield High School. Thinking about it as sort of a millennial text, and you write these very great humor pieces for The New Yorker and their Shouts and Murmurs column, and you wrote what I think is one of the greatest millennial think piece takedowns, right?
Thank you.
And this is the title of it. Millennials are the first generation in history to inspire think pieces about millennials. And of course, there's all these industries that we are supposedly killing, but not the think piece industry. So I was thinking my own experience with Dolly the sheep, the cloned sheep. I have a memory of learning about her in the Weekly Reader, which is that magazine that got sent to like every classroom in the country. And it was like kind of the same era as articles about the Olympics and the Euro and, these kind of like utopian, maybe uneasy utopian visions.
Yes.
And I remember feeling through all these debates about Dolly and cloning, and I just felt so bad for Dolly because
no one was thinking about her.
No one was thinking about her. And she was just like us, she didn't ask to be born. She was just like a kid thrust into this big debate and named after this, boob joke about Dolly Parton. And I just wonder where did that come for you? Because she was born in 1996, so she is a millennial. She's right on that cusp.
So it's also possible I learned about her at the Deerfield Public Library. I honestly don't remember. It probably was the same Weekly Reader that you read. I don't have like a specific recollection of when she came into my consciousness, but I remember it like really making me feel very uneasy and like existential. It brought up all these existential questions for me as a very small child. I guess I would have been 10, which is the perfect age for existentialism, I think. But in the past few years, I forget exactly when I started this project, but it was some anniversary of her birth. And I just went down this rabbit hole, remembering that time and remembering her and learning all. It's such a strange part of history that I feel like cloning was going to be this huge thing that everybody did. And I know, like, I just saw some tabloid article that some celebrity cloned his dog recently.
Oh yeah.
So it's still there, but I wouldn't say it has like changed the course of history in the way that I think everybody thought it was going to at the time. And I think there's something so funny about that. These like epic scientific breakthroughs. Obviously, some of them do change the world, but some of them just kind of don't. And I think that's hysterical and sad. So I guess I was coming to this project from that place of just like the has-been nature of it, and the has-been, like just the nature of celebrity and trends, and what we get obsessed with at certain moments that seem so moot later on.
Well, and sort of like this, like last gasp of monoculture too, like this kind of 90s, like celebrity had a particular flavor to it. So I would love to hear the voice of Dolly. And I don't know if you want to do a voice. I kept thinking that she would have this very kind of big and regal.
Yeah, I sort of picture her British, but I'm not going to do a British accent. I don't know why I picture her British. I mean, she was born in Scotland. So
right, I guess she is
Scottish, but right. I don't know. But yeah, I do. I've only done one reading of this, and I do feel like I sort of have a voice for her. So I can try.
Let's hear it.
So I'll be reading basically, there's a lot that happens in between basically this monologue. It's sort of chunked out within the book and things are happening in between it, but I'm just going to kind of read it as a monologue. Is that right?
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Great. Okay, here I go. Have I told you about my children? They're the apples of my mouth. As you surely know, apples are meant to be eaten, not put in one's eye. Let that be a lesson to you about apples. But I digress. My legacy, my miracles. They're humble, they're kind, they're extremely well-adjusted and emotionally stable. My children are my legacy, proof my entire life was worthwhile. And the fact that I could give birth to them at all, well, that makes me the most historic sheep who ever lived, which makes them the second most historic, all 6 of them. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Dolly, the first cloned sheep. I'm a world-renowned scientific innovation and also a sheep. I've been meaning to tell you something. It's a secret, but I trust you. You're my best friend. It's just that I'm quite dead. All of science in all of history was building toward the moment when I was born, and then there I was, and it was like, now what? It's true that right before you die, your life flashes before you. My first memory is of being in a test tube. I remember that for sure. You know what they always say, life is like a water slide. Well, I've never seen a water slide, but a test tube must be similar. They also always say that birth is like a water slide. I arrived on a birth canal water slide, if memory serves me right. They also always say that fame is like a water slide. It's wet and germy and full of pride, the knowledge of which I could actually never quite hide. My life was slippery and bright and covered with hay like a water slide on a very nice day, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But there was always this nagging question: had science gone too far? And I always answered it easily: no, nothing's too far when you think of your life as a water slide, which it is.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's just like nothing, including death, will stop a millennial's self-regard.
Yeah, completely. Oh my. Yep.
She also has this overly familiar, she's talking to you, the reader, as her best friend. Of course you're her best friend, So then her kids, you call them nepo lambs in the description of the book, which every time I've talked to people about this book, they just love that phrase. And they're also like disaffected kind of hipster types. One's a philosopher with a tie. And
who doesn't know how to read.
Right, of course. They have interesting hairdos and I assume tattoos and things.
Yes,
right?
They think very highly of themselves.
And what is a more relatable to that certain type of artsy, whatever culture worker type to lose funding? So they've lost funding and they're forced out into the wilderness. They don't realize their mom, Dolly, has died. And they're walking around and hoping they can find a farm-to-farm restaurant instead of a farm-to-table restaurant. So it's very funny. I mean, again, every time I tell people about this, people are like locked in. But because of the structure of it, there is this grief underlying it, and a grief about motherhood, but also about this whole scientific culture that's going to keep moving us forward and imagining that things will be funded forever and that we'll have some sort of thriving culture.
Yeah, grief over any sort of utopian vision that any of us might have once had in, say, the Obama era or such thing.
So then it could be mean, right? It could be this kind of mean, easy send up of millennials, but we have actually this. Am I onto something there? There's like this kind of like respect
trying.
for them too. They're trying. Okay. Tell me more about that.
I mean, I think there's two sets of siblings. Three of them were born in this incredible privilege and luxury on this fancy, well-funded scientific institute. And the other were deemed scientifically redundant very young and kicked out into the wild to fend for themselves at a very young age. So they're sort of finding also their siblings for the first time that they didn't know they had. And so part of it is sort of like a haves and have-nots, but it's also like I don't know if you ever saw that documentary, Three Identical Strangers, where it's like these three, highly recommend. It's a crazy story of these three brothers who were raised in different households, basically because of a scientific experiment. And then found out later in life, like that the adoption agency had done all this sketchy shit. But yes, they've had this sort of existential hole, for lack of a better word, like their entire life, this emptiness, because they just have this sense that something in their life is missing. And they're filling it with farm-to-farm restaurants and fancy grooming and whatever, but it's not really working. And so finding each other for the first time is kind of the first time they've ever felt any sense of kind of wholeness and fulfillment through each other. But then they're still kind of stuck in their old stupid ways at the same time.
Right. And even like the kind of commune they find, there's all sorts of debates and, insider bickering and stuff. But again, you have this, I'm just like, the story structure is so tight where you clearly did work in the theater, right? Because it's like you also are at the same time realizing this is coming out of all of the, whether it's the haves or the have-nots, their lack of power and meaning making in this world.
Yeah, they're sort of, each set of siblings is kind of equally disempowered. They just have different kind of visions of themselves.
Oh, it's incredible. I guess I want to ask you about the form and the form of the graphic novel as compared to any of the other forms you've worked in, because it does really launch us into these ideas and allows us to get those multiple layers happening at once. As you said, there's Dolly's voice, but then as she's narrating, you're seeing her kids kind of going through life.
Do stupid stuff.
Right. So when did you find the graphic novel form or the comics form?
Yeah, I was very late to comics and drawing and graphic novels. I as we talked about a bit, like a huge theater nerd in high school. And I think I was also like a big art kid, but at some point in high school had to decide, I think it was literally like whether to take a theater class or an art class. But in my mind, that was like, I am either becoming a theater person or an art person, and chose theater and just like committed very hard to it in this kind of deranged way. And so completely blocked off the art side of myself for a very long time and didn't start drawing again until I was in my early 30s, during which I also discovered comics for the first time. I had never really read comics or graphic novels out. I knew about superhero comics, but I never really cared about them, but discovered sort of this whole world of indie comics and the history of them, and just became more and more obsessed with them, but didn't feel it for a long time. And still, it's arguable whether my drawing skills, like what can really like do the thing that I want them to be doing, because I started so late and never, I'm like self-taught and don't understand like some crucial drawing concepts, let's just say, but I'm doing it anyway. So this project actually started as a TV project. I'm also a screenwriter, and it had been attached to an animation studio for a long time, and we'd been trying to figure out how to make it in this mixed media way. I had a million meetings about it. And then the writer's strike happened, and I was just at this point where I was like, I just have to do something. Like, I just have to do it myself. And so I started drawing it during the writer's strike, and that's how it came to be. So it sort of has a bit of a TV structure built in, because that's the genesis of it.
So even you lost funding too.
Everyone, I mean, we don't even have to start on that. But yes, I just really got fed up in a certain way with kind of the gatekeepers in that world, which I'm still very much in, but I needed sort of an outlet of something I could fully control. And one great thing about comics is like you write them and also you're producing them, basically. Like to me, it's like drawing it is the equivalent of producing something. So it can exist. And that was very exciting to me.
Oh, I love that. Well, I wanted to ask about the drawing style, and whatever you are saying are limitations. I first wanted to quote back Dolly's voice to you, when she says, "When they think of me, I hope they know nothing was my fault. Everything bad was just the circumstances I was born into. I didn't decide to be the world's first cloned mammal. It just was. Every legacy has its blemishes. Every miracle has its non-miracle parts." So I'm not saying that to critique your art style, which I love, but to ask you about this incredible feature of this graphic novel where the backgrounds are these, like, they look like images you just Googled. Like, okay, I'm Googling.
They basically are. They're like stock,
okay,
they're all free stock photos that I found online.
Image of the night sky or of a forest. Or
when I just searched night sky.
But that might be a formal limitation, but it actually adds so much as a reader to the significance of it. Because if this story is about dealing with the detritus of technology in our kind of technological wasteland world, well, then you see these cartoons, in front of this like real background, and it's so the irony is increased so much
That was
rather
the
than if
goal, for sure.
was it good? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of want they're so in their own bubble and in their own little world that I wanted them to feel like completely outside of the real world, and what better way to do that than juxtapose them with the real world? And like they just feel so apart from it even though they're living in it.
There are just moments where they're walking like through a street or something, or you'll be getting closer to an image, but you'll just expand the picture so you see the pixelization, and it makes it so much more funny to me. I don't know.
It's just so silly. Yeah, thank you. I like that it does that.
Good. I'm glad I was picking up on something. I want to ask, I guess, about motherhood, because Dolly wants so much for her children, as kind of also in her own world and blinded, inadequate as she is. And it seems like this has been a theme you've been exploring for a long time about motherhood, but also just having a body. So I'm just going to quote a couple.
My favorite topics.
Well, good. Okay, let's get into it, because
yes.
You said here's two titles you have for some humor pieces you've written over the last decade or so. One is The Utter Humiliation of Having a Body.
I think I wrote that before I had a child. So
okay,
I feel about it now.
Well, then there's also a piece, which I think might also have been before you were a mother, Why Women's Bodies Are Bad for Women.
Yeah, I stand by both of those now that you've mentioned them.
Well, tell me more about where this all comes from. Clearly, it's somewhat autobiographical.
Yeah, I just, I have like a body that has multiple chronic illnesses, and living in it is not always easy. And it's just, there's a pathos to that I'm always interested in exploring. And motherhood certainly literally exacerbated those things in my own body, but it just makes you come face to face with your bodily form in a way nothing else does. And I think there's like in terms of Dolly, I mean, I don't think she like knew she was getting pregnant. She's sort of like there's a bit of a forced breeding element, but she did fall in love with her co-breeder David the ram, who is the name of the actual sheep.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, all the names are the actual names of her children.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's incredible. I didn't know that.
And it was David David who was a some sort of mountain ram. I forgot exactly. Yeah, the body, motherhood, very interesting to me in life, and huge topic I explore in my work and continue to.
Well, there's this moment in The Utter Humiliation of Having a Body, this comic you did, where you're saying, well, even your mind, that's part of your body. You're kind of confronting the reader with these things we don't really want to think about. And included near the end of that comic is the suggestion that even that feeling, that weird feeling that you're feeling now about having a body, is also part of your body. And like you cannot escape. It's a horror story. I mean,
yeah, it is. I mean, my husband and I always joke that we would be much better off as brains in a vat. Like we would just be thrilled to not have to deal with our bodily forms. And I stand by that.
So there's a sort of throwaway panel where we're at the Dolly exhibit, where we realize Dolly has been narrating from her taxidermied
state.
And there's a human mother and child looking at it. And the child says to the mother, well, am I a clone? And the mom says, well, sometimes I feel like you're a clone, which also it was funny as I was passing by it, but it kind of stuck with me because that is either a blessing or a curse, or maybe it's kind of always both, right?
I had one of those moments just today where I was driving my daughter to school, who's 3.5, and I have a lifelong nail picking, nail biting habit. And I'm at a stoplight and I turn around to look at her, and she's like literally doing the exact same thing that I'm doing, just like kind of picking at this one, nail skin. And I'm like, oh, we're the same person. Like, what? This is crazy. Like, part of it is she saw me do that, but part of it, I feel like we were both kind of doing it unconsciously. And I'm like, that's freaky. And I feel like the experience of motherhood is just nothing but freaky. It's also, it's like there's a magic in that freakiness, but it's real freaky.
Okay, so now this is like my big picture question. Is the relationship between motherhood and art making? Because I think you're confronting us with these existential questions of reproduction, and you're giving us some sort of mirror or experience to feel that, to reckon with it, to laugh about it. What is your do you have a sense of your goal with trying to put it into these very strange and odd forms?
I just can't stop. I don't know. It's sort of like how I feel like art making of any kind is always how I've kind of tried to make sense of the world and of my life. And that's sort of, how the lens through which I see the world. And so whatever I'm dealing with just works its way in somehow. And it is the question of whether or not to have a child is something that has like plagued me since I was like 25. Since however old I was, I must have been like in my mid-20s when you start to ask yourself the question, is that a path you want to take? And I had a really fraught kind of journey to get there. And it's always been such a juicy question for me personally, and something that I think people are talking more and more about in the sort of public discourse, but it's so personal, it's so global, it's sort of, it's like the seed of everything. All of humanity came that way in some way or another. And so I'm just kind of obsessed with it. I don't know. It's like, it's both personal and political. It's just sort of the nexus of so many things that I'm interested in, including the body and living in the meat sack that we do. So I think I just try to write about things that fascinate me and baffle me, and that continues to be one of them.
Yeah. So I think I want to ask about what could be a counter to the sort of horrors that we've been describing, whether that's a personal horror of, a mother and child realizing they might have some of the same issues, or even just, as in this book, all this kind of celebrity narcissism. And as you mentioned, these siblings, they do find their long lost siblings and they're kind of joined in a family. There's these little hints of a philosophy of interconnectedness that might be a counterforce to that kind of whatever we're calling millennial self-regard, or beyond to any generation. There's even a fly at one point that lands on the, what would you call it, a snout of a
of the ram,
of a ram, and the fly says, right. Well, tell us.
Fly. Everyone has a best friend in this world, real or imagined or fly.
Well, that fly best friend says something like, well, we're all interconnected, and and then it's kind of dismissed as, well, you've been, eating the psychedelic snot from a deceased beetle again, haven't you? This is some drug trip you are on. But, there's moments again when the lambs are just screaming, they're just saying through the streets, where I, as a reader, who I've now been told am Dolly's best friend, I am identifying with that, so I'm being given that interconnectedness of whatever desperate predicament we're all in. So I don't know. I don't want to ask you necessarily where do you stand on interconnectedness, but it is there as a glimmer of possibility in the book. So why was that important to include?
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm always striving for. And whenever I'm feeling shitty in whatever way, the answer is always community and the people around me. And that's sort of, I guess, a value of mine. I don't know if it's like a belief about interconnectedness kind of in a spiritual way, but in a practical human way, it's something that has been incredibly valuable in my life and that I try to drive my actions towards. And so I think, but it's not always easy, and community has lots of annoyances, and everyone's got their stuff. And so it's not like a clean, perfect answer to these individualistic woes either, because ultimately a community is a bunch of people or sheep. So
well, and that we do all share DNA, and there is, I think too, there was some stem cell research that came out of Dolly, I think.
Yes, I think that was the actual groundbreaking thing ultimately, was the stem cell stuff that followed from that discovery. So I take back my earlier comment about it leading to nothing, but still, cloning in particular seems to have become practically nothing.
Yeah, there's almost also a glimmer maybe of suggestion that, or a hope that nothing is wasted, that Dolly's life, or even these, terribly disaffected sheep, that there is yet some hope for them, whether that's community or an audience.
Yes, yeah, she's very obsessed with her legacy, which is just an interesting thing for a sheep to be obsessed with. I don't know. But she, so much of her life was dictated by the people, the scientists who controlled her. And so it's like legacy sort of implies you did something rather than had some done to you. And I think that's why she's so obsessed with it, because I think probably she feels that she didn't do much of anything with her life. But she's grasping desperately to feel that she did do something with her life. And her children are a real thing that she did.
Yeah, and it is like the voice gives her some agency. And I guess that sort of, at least from a story perspective, we have to respect. But now I'm thinking bigger questions about the fate of our whole society or generation.
Oh no, don't go there.
Well, I want to ask you for an answer about that, but I wanted to ask you about another. So you have one of your New Yorker comics pieces is called Animal Behaviors I've Adopted as My Own, and it has a bunch of different animals, and there's one that is of a whale. And I will say it looks remarkably like you, right? It's kind of your stand and has glasses and a bob, and looks very cool and says...
Really cool whale.
Right. But you're sort of making yourself into this comic character, and the comic says, as one of these animal behaviors you've adopted as your own, echolocation is not just for whales anymore. What other type of communication is there besides the type that takes place across great distances? So
sad.
Yeah.
We must have been in a real mood that day.
Well, so this is my question from you. that's sort of, I think about all of your work is, does it make it less embarrassing or humiliating to write about how impossible it is to write, to make communication about how impossible it is to communicate? Do we find community in that, or is it just a scream in the darkness?
Hopefully a little bit of both. It definitely starts as a scream in the darkness, and then hopefully other people start screaming too, also in the darkness, and maybe we hear each other a little bit. That's sort of the hope, but I do think that the initial impulse is simply a scream in the darkness, unfortunately.
Wow. We have a little bit more time. I did just want to kind of ask you about just a general question of what you're working on now or upcoming, but I'd also like to hear kind of just how, someone becomes like a New Yorker cartoonist. It's such a privileged position.
It is.
Or sought after position.
Yeah. Yeah, as I think I said earlier, I started cartooning just on a whim in my early 30s. I think it was like when I was 30 and I was kind of in that turning 30, what am I doing with my life? I had, spent my early 20s working in theater in New York and then moved to LA and was working in writers' rooms as a writer's assistant at that time, and just kind of kept hitting my head against the wall in terms of my own creativity. Kept writing pilots and screenplays, that would get a little bit of attention and then end up in a Dropbox file in the graveyard of former projects. But something like clicked in me when I started drawing. My earliest drawings in that era where I had started this like separate Instagram that was just these self-portrait comics, these sort of single panel, like similar to kind of the animal one, the whale one that you mentioned, this kind of a bit morose self-portrait kind of Daria type character, just saying things. And that was the thing that sort of people seem to be like respond to those in a way that they hadn't to my work in the past. And it's sort of drawing and working in a more like cartoony way kind of made my writing make a lot more sense, because I was writing these live action screenplays and pilots that like tonally just felt a little odd because that's how my brain is. And suddenly when I started cartooning, it was like, oh, now it makes sense. Now this stuff that she's done before like makes sense in an animation context, basically. So I started writing a bunch in animation. I had a show in development at Showtime that was sort of launched from those self-portrait comics, but had a whole high concept premise and all this stuff. So it was around that, like a couple years into that, the New Yorker, the cartoon editor changed hands, which for the first time in like 35 years, from Bob Minkoff to Emma Allen, Emma Allen is a millennial. I think she's about my age, and I think I would not have. She somehow found me online, I think, and I started submitting that way. And it's fun. It's cool. I mean, I've met some other great cartoonists that way. I'm just starting to really find a sense of community around it now, like 8 or 9 years into doing it, because I had this whole other world in like the playwriting world and also in kind of screenwriter LA world, but the cartoon world felt like a totally different universe and still sort of does. But I feel like I'm starting to understand it more and more, especially after this book has come out and I've been, tabling at comic festivals and stuff like that, which has been really satisfying and fun. So that's sort of the journey. And I'm still doing both, basically. I'm now working on another graphic novel that is also themed around motherhood. And I just finished adapting a novel as a screenplay that's not about motherhood at all, which was also refreshing. It's a horny ghost movie. So we'll
fabulous.
see what happens with that. And we're like out to directors right now. So I just kind of keep throwing spaghetti at the wall in whatever form makes sense for the project at the time.
I love stories of artists finding their voice and figuring out a form or a new form.
Yeah. I feel like I really found my writer's voice through drawing, which is a sort of strange way in, but it kind of made everything click for me.
Yeah, I think that might be a good place to end. Is there anything else that you want to say or promote, or where can people
Think
find
so.
you?
Oh yeah, you can find Goodbye Dolly and my other comics on my website, annafeinberg.com, Anna with an H, which I added the H in third grade. And it stuck. And I'm on Instagram. It's just my name. That's really the only social media that I do, and I don't do it that great. Working on it. But thank you. This was such a wonderful conversation. You're such a great reader, and I feel so seen.
Oh, good.
Wonderful.
You can find out more about Annah Feinberg on her website, annafeinberg.com, and look for Goodbye Dolly and some of her other comics here in our podcast collection, where you can check out books and other materials by all of our past guests. We'll have links to both of those in the episode show notes. That's our show. Thank you so much to Anna for taking the time to talk with us, and thank you for listening to our 69th interview episode. Comments and feedback are always welcome and can be sent to podcast@deerfieldlibrary.org, or we always appreciate a good rating and review. Go to deerfieldlibrary.org/podcast to learn more about our show and find links to subscribe. You can also follow the library on our social media channels, including our YouTube channel. The links will be on our website or in our show notes. We'll be back with another conversation soon. Thanks for listening.